What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down a move that DBs cannot guard if you run correctly. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it teaches you a few new things. But also, fellas, we are going to be traveling out to 15 states across the U.S. for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps this year. Next up, we are going to be coming out to San Francisco, then Orlando, New Orleans, Charlotte, Dallas, the DMV, St. Louis, Honolulu, Boston, Cleveland, Austin, Seattle, Newark, Denver, and Los Angeles. So if you guys are local to one of those cities, would like to get some work in with us for 2 whole days, 8 hours of training total. We'll have DBs out there working one-on-ones. You guys will get a ton of reps and get better. Check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you out there. Let's get started with this video. So the move that no DB can guard, if you do it correctly, is snapping down. So what does snapping down mean? So how many of you guys have probably heard the phrase, oh, you want to beat the drum at the top of the break? I'm sure anybody that's ever played wide receiver has heard that phrase at one point or another. Or, hey, you want to sink your hips. You do not want to do both of those things. You want to be violent and snap down at the top of the break so you can create energy and explode out of there with your routes. So let me explain. So every single route that we run, what are we trying to sell? What are we trying to make this DB think that I am going to be running? A fade. I want to make him think that I am going deep. So what's required to be able to run deep or make the DB think that you're running deep is speed, stride, and pad level. I need to run. I need to be running hard. I can't be running up into a route going half speed because that's not going to be believable, especially as you guys get older. The DBs get more talented. They have more disciplined technique. That's not going to get them to bite and not going to get them to open up the gate and open up their hips. So you got to run fast. Number 2, you got to run in full stride. If you're running routes and let's say before the break point, you start taking all these choppy steps because you're preparing for the break or you're preparing to sink your hips, that's an indicator. That makes the DB guess and know exactly what we're doing. And then some guys, what they'll do before the break point is they'll run up and they'll raise their chest up. They'll pop up because they slow themselves down that way. We do not want to do that. So all of those things come down to selling vertical. And the reason why we want to sell vertical is because that'll get the DB out of there. So when you try to change direction when you're doing all those things and you don't have this violent drop of your hips, aka snapping down what this wide receiver does, you will not get open. You will spend too much time at the top of the break, you'll drift, and you'll just flat out be slow. So that is why we want to snap down. So what are the mechanics of it? This is a lot easier said than done, obviously. I could sit here and talk about snapping down all day, but what's something that you actually want to think about to drop your hips? So if I'm at the top of the break and I'm trying to drop my hips and I'm trying to be violent, there are 2 things that I tell my wide receivers that seems to help them out. You want to think of it with your butt and your hips like you're sitting in a chair, and you want to try to bring your chin to your knee. Those are the 2 points of balance. So when we go to the top of this break here with this wide receiver, he's snapping down running a dig. You can snap down on a comeback, a curl, a dig, a stop route, a hitch route, pretty much anything that doesn't require a single cut break. So when you snap down right here, watch what happens. He's keeping stride, keeping speed. He's violent with the hip drop. Because when you guys can sit in a chair like this, not only will that slow you down, but that will create energy. This is why I hate the phrase, hey, you want to sink your hips. Because when you run up to a break point and you have a slow sink of your hips, what do you think that does to the DB? That's a slow amount of time for him to be able to recover and for him to drive on this thing. But when you can drop on a dime, that does not give the DB enough time to react. He's thinking, oh crap, I got beat. But by that time, we're already out of the break because my hips were violent and I got low right away. Now, the issue that guys will have is that when they snap down, when they drop their hips, their chest will be straight up in the air. They will not be going forward. They will not be in an explosive pad level position. Now, that is going to make you drift on the break or be off balance. Because imagine if this wide receiver, his chest was up in the air. His chest was up in the air, but he snapped down like this. All of his weight would be shifted backwards. So what would happen is that he would either drift on the route, maybe slip on the route because his feet are going to be way out in front of him, or he's just going to get flat out stuck. And all of those things will allow this DB to recover. That's why I hate the phrase sink your hips, because guys will sink their hips, but their chest stays straight up in the air. You want to snap down. You want to change levels. You almost want to pretend that there is a tiny doorway at the top of the break and you're trying to dip under the doorway. So what you want to think about is you're trying to slam your chin to your knee. Not actually, obviously, but the hips slow you down, chin goes to knee to put you into an explosive position because now I can make a sharp cut because I'm low enough. Now, some of you might think, well, why don't I just get low however I feel like it and sink my hips? That's not how you create energy because the goal of every route is to self-fade, get this DB to commit, create energy so we can accelerate out. That energy turns into acceleration, and that acceleration is what will widen the gap and get you separation from this DB. He does not have this speed out of the break. He is not able to get to this ball with this much separation if he's not violent with his hips. He won't be able to cut on a dime, he won't catch the DB off guard, and he won't be able to accelerate. So fellas, make sure we are doing that and make sure we are snapping down at the top of the route. Now, some of the mistakes that guys will make is that they won't get low enough at the top of the break. And we're going to show a bad example of that right now. So let's play this thing full speed. Great job of this wide receiver snapping his hips and being able to accelerate. So let's watch this wide receiver at the break point, because he doesn't beat the drum. He doesn't just sink his hips. He tries to snap down. But watch what happens here, because he takes a lot of steps and wastes a lot of time at the break point. He still gets open, but it's only because the DB slipped. So let's talk about what he did wrong here. So at the top of the break, he's running full stride, full speed, good pad level. But when he snapped, he did not get low enough. So honestly, quite frankly, I feel like this DB should have been able to cover this. I think he just honestly slipped because he got caught up with his feet. I don't think it was because the route was so great. So the reason why, and again, this goes to show though how important selling vertical is, because that can get that DB really bailing out of there. We just have to clean up those details at the top of the break. So watch when he decides to snap down. He's doing this on a comeback route. He's snapping with his inside foot, which would be correct. But when he gets low, you see how he kind of drops his butt down a little bit. His chin is kind of to his knee, but he's not getting as low as he should. He's not being violent with that hip drop and shooting his entire pad level down. Fellas, you got to almost try to touch your chin to your knee, because that's the only way we are going to make a sharp cut when I'm running full speed. You guys have to understand how hard it is to cut while running full speed. That is one of the hardest things that you can do as a wide receiver. So many wide receivers don't know how to do that. And so many wide receivers are hesitant to do it because they don't want to hurt themselves. You will not hurt yourself doing this if you have the correct technique. But if you guys are up tall and you guys are snapping down but not getting low enough, and it's just kind of a slow, gradual sink of your hips, you're not going to run explosive routes, or you're going to strike the ground being so tall, not getting low enough with a lot of speed that you can hurt yourself. But let's watch what ends up happening here, because he does get open, but you see this, let's count how many steps he takes at the break. That's his first, that's his second step, third, fourth, fifth, 6, and then 7, he's finally out of this break. So trust me, fellas, I'm not a big steps guy. I'm not that guy that's going to tell you, hey, you got to get out of the break in 3 steps. I'm more about getting rid of wasted time, not so much wasted steps. But 7 steps is going to get you locked up. That's just too many steps at the top of the break, and that can be solved by getting low right now. Not a gradual sink, not being tall with your chest, not leaning back. Let's get violent with my hips, and let's drop right now, like you're crushing a can, fellas. So let's play this thing full speed. So this is a great example of selling vertical, but if you don't have good technique with that snap down, what will happen? So now, you guys, let's say, for example, you're good with the snap down. You're starting to get better. You're starting to get out of breaks a little bit faster. What so many wide receivers do is this bad habit that this wide receiver is about to showcase for us right now, and that is turning your body before the hips get into the break. Now, I see this time and time again. I love teaching this snap down to wide receivers. I love showing them how to do this because they see such fast. They see it fast. Gains in the top of the break. They get out of breaks so much faster. Quarterback's timing is almost screwed up because of how quickly they're getting out of the break, which is a good thing. You want that quarterback to get the ball out of his hands as fast as he can. But what ends up happening is guys get a little too anxious and they start cheating the route because they're like, oh, I'm getting out of this break fast now. Let's see if I can get out a little bit quicker. So let's watch what he does here. This is a very, very bad habit that this coach should be correcting. So let's play at full speed. He comes up, but watch his body, how it turns before he drops his hips. He runs up, he turns. That is probably one of the worst habits we could get into, fellas. Because when you guys are running a route, and let's say it's let's use that last example, that comeback route. Where's that DB's eyes supposed to be? Our hips, right? So he's supposed to be reading my hips because that's what he does in man coverage. So if you're running a route and you start to turn your hips and turn your shoulders before you drop your hips, fellas, you're going to get locked up like that because you're letting the DB know, hey, I'm making a break. Hey, I'm about to turn. And this is very, very unrealistic to do 15 yards downfield. whenever I work a hip drop with my wide receiver, we try to make it as realistic as possible. Like, I know they're working hitch routes here, and this is only 5 yards apart, but you got to freaking on a hitch. You got to be so disciplined with your technique because it's very easy to cheat it. Because if you do this 15 yards downfield and you try to turn, and you see how this foot is striking outside of his frame because his body is turning too early, that is a great way to tear your ACL, hurt your knee very badly. Because when you have a lot of speed going into it and you turn that body before the hips drop down, that is very, very bad. So, fellas, when you start getting comfortable with this snap down, this violent hip drop, do not turn your body too early. Let's stay committed. Let the hips get you in and out of the break. But you might be thinking, well, how do I turn out of the break? I don't want to snap down and then be facing forward for forever and then have to turn out of it. I'm going to show you how on this next example. So let's play this full speed, fellas. Please do not fall into this bad habit. Do not do this while you're doing drill work. I don't care how close the cones are. You have to emphasize the technique. If your drill work does not translate to an actual route, you should not be doing it in the first place. So let's look at this example here from this wide receiver. He's running a curl route. So it's not a dig. This is a curl. So let's play at full speed. He comes off here, but watch how the hips get him out. The foot that pivots him out of the break is the pivot step. So I'd be doing you guys a disservice if I didn't mention this pivot step on a snap down video, because it's pretty much the key to getting your hips out of there without turning and giving the route away. So he's pushing vertical, running full stride, running full speed. Watch what he does. So this is that snap down, right? Watch his hips. Sitting in a chair, chin goes to his knee. This is about as good as it can get, fellas. But watch how when he snaps down, his hips and shoulders are committed fade. Imagine if he did what that last wide receiver did. Started to turn shoulder, started to turn hip this way before he broke down. That foot would be so far outside of his frame and he'd have so much speed going into it, he would probably either hurt himself or slip really badly. So stay committed with your hips and shoulders and let the hips drop you out. Now, to get your hips out of there faster, to get out of the break quicker, watch what he does with this second step. He snaps, and now he pivots the second step. Because when you can pivot that second step and almost turn your toe on a 45-degree angle, watch what this third step does. It naturally will hook around and you could drive out of the break. That third step will hook and you can drive. You could actually drive back to the ball. So it's a snap, pivot, hook. Not saying it has to be 3 steps. If you take a couple extra steps after that, fine. But at least you got your hips out of the break as quickly as possible with good form. You didn't round it and you didn't turn too early, giving away the route, making yourself more susceptible to injury. So fellas, that snap, pivot, hook, the only reason you could take that pivot and hook step is because you got low. And because you got low quickly, you were violent, that pivot and hook step can create energy to where you could shoot back to the ball. So fellas, that if you can do this, no DB can guard your routes. No, he won't. If you guys can sell vertical, you can drop on a dime, create energy by dropping your hips on that snap down, on curls, comebacks, stops, digs, whatever. That will get you separation. Let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. Great job at this wide receiver being violent and coming back to that ball. All right, fellas, really want to thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. We always appreciate it. And again, fellas, if you'd like to come out to one of our 15 off-season camps, we were traveling out to 15 different cities across the U.S. We'd love to have you out to one of our camps. The 2-day thing, 8 hours of training, the works. So check out that very first link below if you're interested, fellas. I'll see you guys next time.